Welcome to The World Awaits.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
I'm Kirsty Bedford, journalist, editor and travel writer.
And I'm Belinda Jackson, author, travel journalist and columnist, and we're your weekly co-hosts.
Welcome back to The World Awaits. How are you all?
Hi everyone.
I'm not going to ask how you are, Belle, because I'm not rude. I'm just, we're going to get to that bit a bit later because our interview this week is going to be with Belle about her recent trip to Dubai, where she was caught in a once-in-a-lifetime flood. If you follow her on her socials, which is global Salsa _Salsa, you would have seen she was interviewed all over the nation about being caught in those floods. So we're going to cover that off a bit later, and also her once-in-a-lifetime experience in the little-known country of Oman. So we're going to get to that very soon.
Oh, I'm looking forward to revealing the good, the bad, the ugly, and the very, very beautiful of my recent trip. So while I was away, schlepping away in the Middle East, what were you doing this week, Kirsty?
So, well, given a big part of our job is actually reviewing hotels, I've been a bit lucky to stay in two hotels in the last couple of weekends. So first up was Dorset, Melbourne, where you actually came back and stayed at. So you were there. I was there one weekend and then you were there the weekend after.
Yeah, I did. I just, slipped that in between the jet lag. If you didn't know it, the Dorset is a 4-star hotel which has just turned 1 year old, and it's in an unusual little part of Melbourne in Little Lonsdale Street in the west of the Melbourne Grid. So it's the second Dorset in Australia after the one on the Gold Coast, and it's one of 64 that is owned around the world by its Hong Kong-based parent. But it's a bit of a secret squirrel here in Melbourne. I thought, anyway, Kirsty, they pack a lot into a little space with an indoor heated pool, a big gym, loads of big format artworks, which are actually curated by a friend of mine, Anna Flanders. So it was really cool to see her name up there. And there's 316 rooms. Did you realise there were that many rooms? I actually had to take a look. So there's 8 floors, and even some pet-friendly rooms too. So I think we were both on the top floor. And if you're on the top floor, you're in the suites, which means you get access to the club lounge with its canapes and drinks in the evenings and the breakfast, although no hot food. So that's next door in the main restaurant. And I went out for a little scout around the area, and I stumbled across K-Town, which is Melbourne's Korean hotspot, which is Healy Lane, and it's just full of Korean barbecue and karaoke. And there's selfie booths and KFC, that's Korean fried chicken, and vast pots of beer, just like you were back in Seoul, sinking them back open until about 1 a.m. And this is all minutes walk to Southern Cross Station and the bus to the airport, because Melbourne still does not have a rail link. I'll have a little rail about that later on. And it's actually, the Dorset is a really reasonably priced hotel. I did a quick search on the hotel booking sites for a midweek stay next month, and it's under $200, which by Melbourne standards is a bargain, and by Sydney standards is actually unheard of for a new hotel. So we'll pop that one in the show notes for you to take a look at.
Yeah, I did. I have to say, I did love the little detail of Melbourne, the Melbourne art everywhere. And I have to say, we really enjoyed the club lounge. I went up there and had a sneaky little drink. And it had a really nice ambience. And the decor in the bar is really gorgeous. It's, all sort of plush velvet seating, and it was really lovely. And while Belle was bedding down at the Dorset on the same weekend, I was actually at the newly reopened The Lyle in South Yarra, which has been open to the public for about 4 weeks. It's actually a long-standing, beautiful boutique property in Melbourne, and it used to have a spa, but it's been completely renovated by the owners actually of the Royce, so which is on St Kilda Road. So it's it's a stunning property, and the epitome of calm, from the colours to the music and this beautiful central Japanese maple garden. And it's only about 100 metres from the train station right off Turak Road, which is on a little sort of tree-lined side street, so really lovely and quiet. So I'm going to be writing a review about that for Signature Luxury Travel and Style, so I can't say too much just yet, but it's only 51 rooms, and you actually wouldn't even know there were 51. It's just so calming and lovely and feels very intimate. And the here's a little bit of information for you. The owner is actually still living in the penthouse suite, so he doesn't even want to leave. So since it was renovated, he's apparently they'd quite like to have that penthouse suite to sell, because obviously that would be an incredible room. But yes, no, he's staying put for the time being.
Oh, it sounds amazing. I've only been into the foyer and had a drink there, and it was gorgeous before the renovation, so I can't imagine what it's like now. So that's two fantastic properties, the Dorset and the Lisle. And when our reviews come out, we'll post it on our socials so you can have a read. So have a look on Kirsty's Insta and Facebook at Kirsty Writes, and you'll find mine on my Instagram at global_salsa.
You're listening to The World Awaits. We'd love it if you could leave us a rating and review on your favourite podcast platform.
Kicking off today, we are going to chat about the world's best airports from the awards, the annual awards out by Skytrax. These are regarded as the awards that set the benchmark for the entire world airport industry. So they're voted by customers who assess the customer service and facilities across more than 500 airports. And the top airport is Doha Hamad Airport in Qatar. So I passed through there fairly recently. I always really like it because it's got a Harrods in there, and you can have a gorgeous cup of tea and buy some tea and take home without having to get to London. And that really sets the tone for the airport. It is glossy and fancy and very, very big. Thank goodness they've got a train that runs through it.
And second was Singapore's Changi Airport. And
Your favourite?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this on this podcast because it's probably most famous for having the world's tallest indoor waterfall, which is just so spectacular when you come out of the plane and you walk through there. It's just remarkable, this waterfall. And then there's also, butterfly gardens and a hedge maze and massive entertainment areas. I mean, we have said this before, but you could literally just stay at that airport and hang out. And it's been voted the world's best airport 12 times, including last year. But then this year it was bumped.
Yeah, they have a bit of serious rivalry going on there. Following after Doha and Changi, then we had Seoul Incheon, two Tokyo airports, Haneda and Narita, and Paris's Charles de Gaulle was next. And in that order, then coming in number 7 was Dubai. Don't let me start. I'll give you much more detail about my thoughts in Dubai a little bit later.
And 8th, 9th and 10th were Munich, Zurich and Istanbul. And Australia doesn't actually feature until 19th position. That was when Melbourne slips in there, followed by Brisbane at number 32.
I tell you, Melbourne got some flack on social media about it, partially because that absolute lack of rail link. And, I passed through recently, and some of the criticisms I read on social media were things like that it just was a bit grotty and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, it has great coffee, and that redeems everything. But coming through the other day, it was, it needs a bit of work for its receiving people into Australia. So a couple of other interesting categories include, there was a new category for best art in an airport, which went to Houston Airport, which has a public art collection valued at around US $30 million.
Wow.
And it has regular live performances. It has one of the biggest art collections held by an airport authority in the world. And then it was followed by Mumbai and Singapore in that category.
And getting back to Melbourne, we've mentioned this before, but I think it's just so disappointing that we don't seem to really have in our airports that you don't come through and feel like it's quintessentially Australian. Like when you go to New Zealand or any of the Pacific Islands, you come through and you know where you are. You come through and you have this incredible cultural experience, and you just. But I don't know that Australia does that very well. It's a real shame. I think we try to do it, but I don't know that we do it particularly well. And that's another thing that I think when you're talking about Melbourne needing to step up a bit. I do also think Melbourne's a lovely airport, but there's a long way to go in that area. We focus a lot on, particularly in Sydney, on luxury. There's a really big focus on all these beautiful luxury boutiques, which is all very nice. But it would be really nice to have some sort of reference to the culture, I think, when you come.
I totally agree with you on that one. There has been some talk about it having artists in residence and stuff I heard over the years, but they just never seem to come to fruition, and we seem to spend more time. People talk about the customs situation more than they do about Australian culture. We just spend so much time. That's the thing that impresses everybody is how rigorous we are in our customs. But God Almighty, the queues are awful. It's always badly managed. Like we were just being shunted around between smart gates and customs the other morning. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, that quickly grows old. I think who does it really successfully, and you'll find it because they've absolutely cleaned up in the next bit of awards, is Seoul. Seoul has you can hire hanbok, which is those, the traditional big Korean dresses that their national dress. You can hire them and prance around and get your photo taken, and I think that's so cute. As well as doing handcrafts, and they have music. And last time I went through there, I think they had a mock 18th century wedding parade charging through. I think it's exactly what you're saying, that they just get it right. So what other awards were there in the Skytrax Awards, Kirsty?
So Best Dining went to Istanbul, followed by Singapore. And just like you were saying, part of that reason of having those amazing cultural experiences, I think, is probably part of the reason why Seoul also won most family-friendly airport. But it's also obviously dedicated to the facilities available there. So there's a dedicated kids zone and multiple play areas. And gosh, when you go to an airport with young children and there's just nothing for them to do, that becomes clearly evident. Even having sort of one play area or play zone makes all the difference. They've also got a museum and an observatory, so you can go up and watch the planes coming in. I mean, the kids love that. And it's all very well standing next to the window, but if you can actually go up to an observatory and where you can see the whole airport and watch them sort of taking off and landing, that's quite great. And Seoul was followed by, you guessed it probably, Istanbul and Singapore.
Yeah. Do you know, actually, that was, I think, one of the things that Doha does so well. It has massive sculptures and art installations around it, but they're actually slides. So you see these kids sliding down art installations. I always think it's a really great use of a beautiful visual connection, and then kids have got something to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll put the list in the show notes. But most improved airport went to Nisatose in Sapporo Island in Japan, followed by Newark in the US, Santiago and Bangalore.
And Singapore is a regular standout on the list. You'll see its name popping up everywhere. Not surprising, as we've already discussed. So for layovers, maybe everyone needs to head to Singapore. This week, I'm chatting to two-time Australian Travel Writer of the Year, Belinda Jackson, who's also an expert in Middle East travel. Belle has just returned from a trip to the little-known country of Oman and is here to give her insights into what you can do there and why you should go. So let's start, Belle, by telling us a bit about the region and why you wanted to go to Oman specifically.
Yeah, Oman's a funny one. It's regarded as the Switzerland of the Middle East. So the Middle East is having a really bad run with travel at the moment. But throughout all of it, when you look on Smart Traveller, you'll find Oman is consistently green, as in safe to travel, and it has a reputation for just being a really laid back and very traditional country in a region that is embracing enormous change. So I wanted to go back to Oman partly because at this time of year, so May, April, sort of March, April, May, for about 6 weeks it's the rose harvest season, and some of the world's most beautiful roses for their fragrance and are grown here. So I wanted to go back for the rose harvest season. I wanted to see wild donkeys running up and down the hillsides. Oman, so many people are still wearing their traditional dress, so the streets are just so much colour and life, and that's why I wanted to go back and just fill in some of the gaps from the last time that I visited there. Yeah, it's a curious one. And the funny thing is, when I started posting on my Instagram, people were saying, this is my most favourite country. I love Oman, or I've always wanted to go to Oman, which kind of surprises me because it's not, when you compare it to somewhere like the United Arab Emirates or, Jordan is a big hitter in the region for tourism, and Egypt, of course, then Yeah, Oman's not top of the list generally for most people.
Well, let's come back to the rose water because that sounds amazing, and I just want to get some more detail on that. But let's just go back a little step and talk about some practicalities. So how do you actually get there?
Well, there's no direct flights. Oman has its own airline, Oman Air, which connects through Kuala Lumpur. So you can fly up to KL and then KL straight into Muscat, which is the capital of Oman. Otherwise, and probably what more people will do is they'll go into the big airports of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and then it's only a 1 hour flight from there. But Oman is one of the countries that most people get around by hiring their own car. So if you picked up a car hire in Dubai, it's only 4 hours drive from Dubai across this dramatic desert landscapes into Oman. So if you've got the chance to do that, then that would be the way that I would go there. I flew in with Emirates from Melbourne direct into Dubai, and then it's a 1 hour flight from Dubai into Muscat.
And when you flew in, you just happened to fly in when there was a once-in-a-lifetime flood. And so tell us a bit about that. Is it typically wet at that time of year, or is this cloud seeding that everyone keeps going on about, that they're, blowing things up into the clouds, and now it's just turned into an explosion of rain?
Yeah, well, is it typically wet this time of year? No, this is a bloody big desert, so it's a desert for a reason, It's it's not wet, and that was one of the reasons that Dubai got caught so unawares. I mean, my thought is if Dubai is going to be cloud seeding, which is, sending chemicals up into the clouds to bond and bring rain down, then it really does need to build some sewers, because most of the Middle East does not get massive rain. So if it does have a freak flood, and this happens in Cairo, I've seen this happen quite a few times in Cairo, where it rains about 3 times a year, it just suddenly floods, and then about 2 hours later, all of the water just seeps into the sand and disappears. It didn't happen this time in Dubai because they received, something like a year's rainfall in the space of a day. And it was calamitous. There's no other word for it. I flew in. It was a bit of a bumpy land. Like we banked through a big pile of cloud and then dropped down onto the tarmac with a bit of a thud. We did not know, and we're not told that we were arriving in the middle of this storm. So I think everybody was just absolutely caught blindsided. The Dubai government, however, did know about it, and they have a national broadcast. They send out text messages to everybody in the Emirates saying, don't go to work, stay at home because these floods are going to start happening. And when I started seeing the footage coming up of cars literally being dragged down Sheikh Zayed Road, which is the main road in Dubai. So if you're following the metro follows that thoroughfare. People just dumped their cars on the road because they were completely flooded. The water was up into the cars, and they just left the parkers on and walked away from them. And it was astonishing. It was absolutely astonishing. When I got out of the airport, tried to get through the new smart gates, not working. That was some inexplicable reason. I walked out into this absolute storm. No Ubers, no taxis. The metro was still working. So airport workers were encouraging people where they could to take the metro where they were going, and then, somehow getting from there, because the airport was so flooded, was so engulfed. And
no one will be surprised to hear that Belle happened to talk her way into going into the business lounge, where she was subsequently contacted by multiple news outlets to appear, which, and you were telling me, we were just talking quietly on the side, and you were saying to me that you had to rush and put some makeup on because you'd been stranded there so long and you were so tired.
I hadn't slept. I had not slept for more than a day and a half at that point, because I'd flown from Australia, 13 hours up to Dubai. Then I'd gone into an airport. I had a 12-hour layover in Dubai, in which I'd had only a couple of hours sleep because most of the time was spent getting in and out of the airport and doing a hotel review, and then back to the airport, and then, waiting until the next morning. So I was maniacal by this stage, and it also looked like, I was lucky I had my bag with me. I just had to throw all the slap on to do a live TV cross with ABC News. with ABC News Channel. It was a really bizarre experience. And I was in Terminal 2. So Terminal 3 is where we normally fly in from Australia, and it's where the A380s crank in and they go to, they're flying to New York and London and all the big capitals. Terminal 2 is much more of a regional carrier. If you haven't been there, well, I was last there before COVID, and it was an absolute shambles of an airport. And there was just 2 outlets. There was a McDonald's and a KFC. And everyone just sat on, there was no seating. Everyone just sat on the floor eating fried chicken with their hands. So I know it was awful. I was flying to Uzbekistan then. So they have actually renovated it. So it had a couple of nice cafes. Now, one of them is Jones the Grocer, which I don't know, is it Sydney? It's actually a Sydney cafe chain in the Middle East. So it was a bit fancier. So I managed to get a chair and a coffee at some point. But most of the flights are going to places like Kabul and Bangalore and, places in Pakistan that only the person that comes from Pakistan knows that, they were like really minor destinations or little known destinations and destinations that they drew a lot of the migrant workers from. So it was a very different demographic of who was flying in that area and much less facilities. So everybody who was in the business class lounge was all crying because Terminal 3's got the glossy ones with the showers and the spas and the beautiful things, and Terminal 2 has some nice seats and a bit of a buffet. And that's it,
So leaving Dubai, which actually, I have to admit, I tried to call you on WhatsApp, but you were like, Kirsty, what are you doing? You cannot call me. It's illegal. Oh, I actually wasn't aware of that. I don't know if many people are. But let's talk then about some of the other protocols and things that you need to know before you go. So you left there and you went to Oman. You finally got there. You could have driven. Like you said, it would have been a lovely drive.
Except the roads were smashed up. So, yeah. Yeah,
so you eventually get there. But if people are considering going and they don't know much about the country, what are some of the things, are there restrictions? Are there things we need to know before we go? I mean, and did you feel, I mean, you know the region well and speak the language, so it's a little different for you, but I guess, do you think, it's a place where a solo female traveller in particular would feel quite safe?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, absolutely. That is one of Oman's calling cards, is that it is so safe, and the people are just beautiful. Like they'll help you in any way. Like there's still quite a lot of water running over the wadis, down the valleys around Oman. So every now and then you'd find this river that normally is not there for 11 months and 3 weeks of the year. There is no water in these things, and suddenly a town might be split in half by a river, and people would just say, oh, jump in the car and I'll drive across, I'll drive you onto the other side, save you wading through, with your bag up around your ears and stuff like that. That's a very common thing to happen. It is very safe for foreign women, and the expat community, particularly in Muscat, just you never hear them say a bad word about the country. It's well run. It has a great social network as well. You don't see the discrepancy in poverty and wealth that you see in other parts of the Gulf, and for that there is there is a welfare system, there is a safety network. It's really interesting that what I always loved about it, just looking at the country, is that the former rulers have had very strict rules about architecture in the country. So unlike somewhere like Doha, which has been exploring modern artwork and bringing all of the latest newest designs and testing them out on the grounds, Oman has kept its traditional nature. So everything from a public toilet to a hotel must have a certain Omani look about it, which gives this beautiful sense, a real sense of culture and awareness that you are in a country that looks like no other country. And the way people dress as well. So men wear a long white galabaya, which they call a dishdasha there. And you'll just see them walking the streets and their little kumar, the cap on top. And the boys will be, running around doing errands on their bikes, and they'll be wearing these dishdashas and stuff. And so it's unmistakably Omani. And I mean, there are certain things, back to your question about, what concerns or protocols that there are. So, like most of the Gulf in the Middle East, you in the hotels, pretty much around the pool, whatever goes, and you can, crack your bikini and stuff like that. But as soon as you step away from the pool, you throw a wrap on, And then when you are particularly in the smaller villages, less so in Muscat, they do actually ask you, sometimes they put signs out the front of them saying, can you please, cover below your elbows and your knees? So because there is a sense of, a sense of dress and decorum. You're going into particularly in villages, you might be in somebody's house. And if you're there, with a crop top on, does that person feel, was like, oh, okay. I had a chat to a female chef about this, and she said, I'm just not used to seeing partially naked people, particularly if they're in my house and stuff. So I feel, are they considerate of my feelings? And I thought that was quite a nice way of putting it, I think anyway, I tend to dress quite conservatively there because I'm traveling on my own. And so you don't need to draw attention to yourself that you are a solo traveler that does not understand the way of the country. And I want to be, I want to be respectful in that. So I think that's something always to keep in mind, particularly once you get out of Muscat. Then you've why not embrace some of the really beautiful styles and designs that are available in this part of the world?
And like you say, it's just about respect, really, and understanding the sensitivities around dress. So that's really what it comes down to, isn't it? That's really interesting. So
same thing for men too. Can I just say, walking around in tiny shorts. Tiny shorts are for very small boys. Put a pair of capri pants or for core, something that goes down around your knees. Knees aren't great. I don't know. I don't have great knees. Don't know what your knees are like. Don't look at them. But let's just say, don't need to show your knees really. That goes for blokes as well. The old bintang t-shirt singlet thing does not cut it there, even though it does get hot. Dress up a little bit, people.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a bit about, before we move on, let's talk a little bit about one of the reasons you were there, and this, because your socials, those beautiful roses were just, oh my gosh, it was, and the video on one of them, the sound was so gorgeous, you could hear a lamp or something in the background, and then goat, it was just really, they were, it was really lovely. So tell us a bit about one of the main reasons you were there was to do a story on this annual event. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I went up to Jabal al-Aqda, which translates as Green Mountain. Sounds slightly less romantic in English, doesn't it? And this is a couple of hours out of Muscat. And the mountains they're actually really rugged. And up here is grown the very pink damask rose. And when it's distilled, it create, they're distilling rose water in these tiny villages. And so about six weeks of the year around this time is when the roses are being picked, and they're all picked by hand. And that video that you would have seen was of two men picking the roses by hand. And they're in their white distachas and they're, in their Omani caps, which should be given to you by somebody who loves you. So generally the first one your mother has embroidered for you. And they're just walking through these rose terraces. And the terraces are grown, the terraces are staggered down the side of these very, very steep mountains. And some of the steps that run down the terraces are absolutely terrifying. I took a walk down one, which I had seen on Instagram, and I was like, how scary can this be? And there was a point where I was like, okay, not going here, because this is a flight of mud brick stairs that are about 70 centimetres wide, and there's nothing on either side of you. It's just a sheer mountain drop. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, time to turn back now. I got a photo just as I'm turning around, and some people have said, you don't look very comfortable. I'm like, no, not comfortable. But for the most part, you're not hanging, you're not running. If you're born there, yes, run up and down the rose terraces. Me, I don't need to do that. But, the fragrance of them. And you do hear little goats bleating. And there's wild donkeys that run around these areas. And there's also a navigation system of channels, because they are careful with their water and how they're irrigating down the side of these mountains. And this irrigation system, the Faluj, is a UNESCO heritage listed invention by Omanis. And just that this time of year is where everything is green and pink and there's, bright blue skies overhead, and the scent of the rosewater being distilled in the villages is just astonishing. And there's a walk that you can do. So I stayed at the Anantara property, Anantara, Jabal al-Akhtar, on the top of one of the mountains. And from there, there's a couple of very traditional villages that have been connected by a walk that you follow between them, and you go in through the villages, and you can go into people's houses. They have a sign saying Rosewater Factory here, written in hand, stuck on the side of a wall. And you just wander into someone's house. They're like, "Hey, do you want to come and see how I make rosewater?" I'm like, "Well, yes, I do."
Is that an experience you have to book through the hotel, or if I'm a traveller going there, can I just do that? Can I just stay?
You can do it by yourself.
Yeah,
you can do it by yourself, or you can take a guide. What I did both. So I was up super early. I was out at 6 o'clock in the morning, which I know is not like me, right?
I wasn't going to say. I was tight-lipped.
You totally would.
But my face said it all, though. Lucky we're on podcast.
So I went down to the terraces at about 6, and because these beautiful roses, like they open all the way up, and they have to be picked with the dew still on them. So that you just, they're still, the heat of the sun hasn't burnt away their fragrance. And so I walked for a couple of hours in the morning, and then later on went back with a guide from Anantara. What was great about it was that all the guides in their rec centre were all locals to the area, so they'd grown up in those villages. So you can do it yourself, or you can take a guide as well.
And what do they do with it? So they pick the roses, you go and watch them, they're picking the roses, they're taking them obviously to make the rose water. And then what happens with that?
Then you spritz it on your face. And
so that's what goes out in local shops and things.
They sell it from their houses. They sell it it gets distilled into oils, which you'll buy throughout Oman. Then, you can also buy a bottle of amouage, which for a very long time was the world's most expensive perfume. And they use the rose essence that's been distilled from these villages as well. So it goes right across into cosmetics and products that are used, from very basic, literally buying it in that village to, the top perfume brand in the world. So it's really quite diverse, and there's different grades of it as well. So there's one distillation that's quite tarry, but that's the one that you spray into your coffee, because Oman frequently flavours its food and its coffee with rose water as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's an amazingly versatile product. And just being there and being surrounded by these roses, and I was really lucky because I was on my own in the 6 a.m. part of my walk, and I'm just walking through, seeing women are bringing big trays with tea and breakfast down into the terraces where the men are picking, and they would just have these big blankets where they empty their bags of roses. They've got bags around their necks, and they're picking and dropping the flowers in there, and then they just empty them onto these big blankets, because they're so fragile. These blooms are so beautifully fragile, and then they lift the blanket up and take them back into the houses to be processed. But they're just so photogenic, and I just happened to see a guy with a very big camera, because Omanis love it. It's not just a thing that foreign tourists go to. Local tourists go up there because they want to be immersed in the clean air and the scent of the roses. And so you get that photo there of just, trickling petals through your hands.
Amazing. Gosh, it sounds like such a beautiful experience. So what's something else? I mean, obviously that's enough in itself to make me want to go. But what's maybe one or two other little things that you can do if you go to this part of Oman?
Well, I would. The town that's at the base of the mountain is called Niswa. It's one of the old capitals of the country. It has a fantastic fort. I don't know if you would have seen on my socials. I've taken a lot of photos of the fort there, which is just part of that. I was talking about Omani architecture earlier, and it's those crenellated roofs, and these are real medieval forts. And used to defend, because these are very tribal areas as well in times past. So they had lots of things like murder holes and archery slots and things like that. Here's a fast fact for you: So this part of the world, of course, everybody eats dates. Dates are one of the, are a life sustenance for a lot of people in the Middle East. So they would, and the date harvest, pluck and then store dates in the food storage area. But if you had an invading army come in, they would chuck all the dates in a cauldron, boil them up, and this is pure sugar, and then they pour them down the motor hole. So when the army was invading, and they pour boiling hot sugar dates over the top of them. There you go. There's a. But what is amazing about this city?
You would say they were throwing them at them.
No, that's a bit Monty Python. What's amazing about Nizwa is the centre of Nizwa was an old mud brick, like most of these places, an old mud brick town that people finally moved out of about 30 years ago, and then it was just being left to crumble. In the last couple of years, a number of Omani local companies have come in and started restoring these old mud brick houses into tiny, gorgeous little boutique hotels. And we're talking, like the one we stayed in, it had 10 small houses with about 6 rooms in each of them, scattered around the old Medina, which and then they've been rebuilding the city walls and at night light them up. Remembering this is very much a night culture because in summer it's so hot, so you lie around all day observing siesta. They do actually observe a siesta sort of from 1 till 4 in the afternoon when it's too hot. And then in the evening, after you've eaten, you walk the city, the old fortress walls, and they've set up cafes and art installations and beautiful lighting all around them. And this has only been kicking off the last couple of years, and it's magnificent. It's beautifully done. It's sensitively restored. It's how we should be treating places that have got histories going back, 1 or 2,000 years. And I think that they've done that particularly well here. So that's Nizwa. But if you had to choose other things why you go to Oman, really, you go in for the desert. You go into glamp in the desert, which I've done before. This time I couldn't do it. I was going to stay at a place called Magic Camps. It was their divine bell tents in Wahiba Sands, in part of the Rub al Khalia, which is the empty quarter, which it shares, a massive desert that it shares with Saudi Arabia. And it's just dramatic. You're surrounded by sand dunes and that silence of the desert that you can only get in the desert because the sand absorbs the sound. So you stay in these gorgeous tents and dine on, Omani food and just feel that sense of nature around you. I couldn't go this time because the roads were closed due to the floods, and I'm heartbroken. But that's okay because I'll be back. And I've stayed in them before. I've stayed in that empty quarter before, and it is just magnificent. So that would be the other key thing I would do in Oman.
Well, I think you've given such a lovely sense of what it feels like, and the senses and the smells, and I can sort of, get a really good visual of what it's like. So where can we read your stories, Belle, when they're coming out?
So I'm writing one for Gourmet Traveller, which will be out in a couple of months' time, and also I'll be going through some of the food things like the rosewater Omani coffee. A little bit of camel kebab, if that so takes you. And then I'm also writing for Luxury Escapes, which is, exploring some of the really beautiful hotels, because you've got these beautiful little mud brick ones, but then I also stayed at the Shangri-La just south of Muscat, no great shakes. That was a very soft landing after the drama of Dubai. I, literally just snorkeled and snorkel with turtles that live in the bay there, because Oman has it's very serious about its animal conservation. It's very, very serious about its turtles. So last time I was there, I saw the hatchlings running into the sea, and this time I was swimming with turtles in the bay in the Shangri-La. And the Shang's pretty nice, I got to say. It's one of the most luxurious of the hotels in this part of in Muscat. So you'll find that in Luxury Escapes.
Well, we will keep an eye on Belle's socials, and that is global_salsa, so that you can see some of what she's been talking about, and also she will post when those stories go live. Thanks for your time, Belle.
Anytime, Kirsty.
You're listening to The World Awaits. We'd love it if you could leave us a rating and review on your favourite podcast platform.
Our tip this week is to help you avoid gastro issues when you travel. Who doesn't want to avoid gastro issues? So a healthnews.com investigation has looked into the 10 places where travellers are most at risk of stomach and bowel issues.
So grown up.
There is literally few things worse than vomiting in a substandard hotel room. So the research monitored the frequency of online Google searches relating to food poisoning, and probably not surprisingly, India came out on top, or bottom, whatever issue. I'm sorry, I had to say that.
Top or bottom, whatever issues you're having. So food poisoning is the second most common form of infectious disease in India, found, not surprisingly, in contaminated food and water. Symptoms typically range from nausea to diarrhea to abdominal pain and fever. And here's a tip if you are visiting India. Experts recommend stringent hygiene and avoiding raw or undercooked foods. I have actually never been sick in India. I know this is going to surprise you, Kirsten, but yeah.
And yes, it will, because you've been sick everywhere else, which we're about to find out. Kenya wasn't far behind, with most cases in everything from dairy and meats to grains and vegetables. And Sri Lanka came in third. Actually, that surprises me. I've been to Sri Lanka and I was never sick in Sri Lanka and the food was amazing. But more cases were reported in the second and fourth quarters of the year in Sri Lanka, which apparently coincides with the religious and socio-cultural festivals. So obviously the food at festivals is a little more lax in hygiene standards. And the highest number of cases were reported from the northern, eastern and central places. So there weren't many places.
Go to the south. Coming in fourth place is Indonesia. I mean, the term Bali belly, like Delhi belly, Bali belly is there for a reason. The survey said that poor health infrastructure, lack of clean water and substandard food safety practices are to blame here. Who doesn't know somebody that's had Delhi belly, right? Or Bali belly even. Actually, all of the above.
Yes. Except you didn't get Delhi belly.
No, I put on weight in India. I can't believe it. I think it was the fried bread. See, when in doubt, fry everything. That's my motto.
And rounding out our list of places where you need to be extra careful to avoid the toilet bowl is Mexico. So the advice is, given Mexico's rich cuisine and unique food preparation traditions, I want to know what these unique food preparation traditions are.
It's ceviche.
It's wise to be mindful of whether your stomach can handle what you're about to eat.
Oh, see, so I've been cooking Mexico as well. God, I think I was eating raw fish at some point though. And I've been cooking some of the other top 10 too, such as Egypt, where I did get sick. Do you know what I ate in Egypt? And you should never do that. Never do this, people. And I think I just was super hungry. Never eat the peanuts at the bar. Like, you should never do it. And I remember doing it going, I shouldn't do this because I'm going to get sick. And also, you're waiting for your gut.
Well, they don't replace them. They just leave them there, and there's a lot of double dipping.
And then if people don't wash their hands when they come back from it's just disgusting. Disgusting. Also, I had one of the best meals I had in Egypt. I remember sitting on a stool in a market, and it was super delicious. And I think I posted something on social media saying, this is how I got, when I report to you that I'm going to get sick tomorrow, this is how I got it. And I took a photo. And sure enough, I was a sick.
Oh, no.
I know, but I was so enjoying it. It was so good. And also, so in that top 10, apart from Egypt, there was Singapore, Morocco. I've been sick there too. And it was during... It was during the festival season. I think it was in Ramadan. And so the food had been sitting around all day since everybody ate before dawn. And I should have known better, but I ate that pigeon pastille and I shouldn't have done it. Also, the Caribbean and El Salvador.
Well, Singapore does surprise me. I've eaten street food in Singapore and I've never been ill. So anyway, but it just proves that you do need to be mindful of where you go and what you're eating, what food you're eating on the streets. When we were in Vietnam, I have to say, there was a lady at the hotel we were staying who was very ill from eating at a food stall. Oh. And my husband actually went Western one night and got really sick. So I think we were saying maybe don't go with Western food when you're in Southeast Asia. But anyway, so he was quite ill for 2 days. So it's not always the local food, but clearly often the way it's prepared.
Well, I think it all comes down to water, really, and that's the base of it. If you're going to be cleaning your teeth with water. Should you use if you're going to be really stringent, using bottled water, not having ice in your drinks, or knowing where the ice comes from. And, as they say, if you drink from the Nile, you'll always return to Cairo. But if you drink from the Nile, you probably also get bilharzia as well.
All right. And we will put a link into the full report in the show notes, which is healthnews.com. But we'll put the full link in the show notes so you can have a look and see, if any of those places you've been ill while you've travelled, and our tip for, how to avoid getting sick while you're travelling. And if you would like to help support our production costs, you can buy us a coffee at coffee.com/theworldawaits. That's ko-fi.com/theworldawaits, so we can continue to bring you inspirational travel interviews with the world's best.
That's a wrap for The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods. And where can people find you, Kirsty?
I'm at Kirsty Writes on Instagram. That's KIRSTIE Writes, WRITES. And where can people find you, Belle?
You can find me at globalsalsa.com or on Insta at global_salsa.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.